Hey folks, today I'm going to be talking about the Slack fair billing policy, or basically this idea that you would give credits or refunds to inactive users. I'm going to talk a little bit about why I think it was such a big part of our product-led growth motion and why I think more companies should embrace it today. Let's dive into it.
SaaS CMO Pro.
Hey folks, Bill Masitis here. I was the OG CMO at Slack. I came in when basically there weren't any marketers. We built that team up from scratch, joined when there were about 50 people. So I have a good kind of feel for those early days of Slack and some of the key decisions that were made that I think really helped Slack have that hypergrowth trajectory. So today I want to talk about the fair billing policy. So what was the fair billing policy? Basically, the idea was we had a lot of people starting to use Slack, and it was a bottoms-up model. So anybody in the company could come and start using Slack, and you might have, let's say 20 people on your team. And the basic idea was, hey, should we charge for every single person who signs up to use it? Or, should we align more towards only charging for people that actually use the product? And this was kind of a big differentiator. In the early days of on-prem software, you got billed for everything in advance, whether you used it or not. But even sometimes within SaaS, you would get locked into these, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year contracts for X amount of users. And if people use it or they didn't use it, you were still kind of stuck paying that price. And so what we tried to do with Slack is we said hey, we are only going to charge you for people that are actually using the product, which just seemed fair, right? That's why we call it the fair billing policy, right? And so what would happen is, you have that 20-person team and someone stopped using it for 2 weeks. Maybe they just went on a long vacation and they truly, did not check in. We would send, a notification to the admin of the team and just be like, hey, Sarah stopped using the product. You've been given a prorated credit, for her account back to your account, right? And it was kind of cool. One, it was, a lot of times the admins on the teams were the first person that kind of created the Slack instance at these companies. And it was just a nice little thing. It wasn't always a huge amount of money, but it was something, right? And, usually you're not used to that where companies are actually giving you, a refund back. And I thought it would just create a lot of goodwill. I'm a big fan of product-led growth, but a big part of that is just the experience that people have with you. If you layer on good experience after good experience after good experience, good sales experience, good marketing experience, good product experience, good billing, experience, they're more likely to recommend you. When they're more likely to recommend you, you're more likely to grow faster. You can measure this via Net Promoter Score, which I did in a separate video, a link below. But it's one of those things that, when you layer on these experience, it makes a big difference. The second reason that I thought it was really helpful for us was that it kind of realigned the incentives of the Slack team itself. All of our employees, we kind of realized pretty early on that, hey, we don't make money unless people are actually using the product, right? That sounds kind of simple, but for a lot of software, enterprise software, that was not the case at all. It was more based on, did you have a really good sales team that could wine and dine the stakeholder, who a lot of times were the CIO or the CTO, weren't even the people using the product, to convince them to buy it, sign up for a long-term deal. And it didn't matter at all if people actually used the product in a weird way. It didn't matter. By implementing just that little change, all of a sudden it's hey, we are incentivized internally if we want to hit our revenue targets, that we got to make sure people are actually using the product. And that manifests itself all over, right? That manifests itself in look, we got to polish these features more to make sure that they're easy to use. We got to think about the onboarding so it's easy to use. We want to reduce friction. A lot of the key tenets in PLG come from when you're incentivized that people actually use the product. In a lot of ways, I loved it because it aligned the value of the user to the value of Slack employees. We both are aligned, right? If we make software that's good and provides value and is frictionless and you can get in and you can start using it and use it more often, that's good. That's good for the user. It was good for us as a company. Where a lot of times I think we have competing goals, right? What's good for the customer isn't always good for the company and vice versa. And so you have these policies which end up, being kind of very confrontational, or they create a lot of friction in the environment. So anyways, that was something that I thought was really helpful. It was the 14-day policy. I know Slack recently updated that to 28 days, which is a little bit longer of a time frame, but it still kind of gets back to that different kind of change to billing. I'm always fascinated with pricing and packaging. I love to hear new approaches, how people are taking it on. Would love to hear from you guys. Did you like that? Has your company embraced something similar? Put it in the comments. I read all of them. And thanks again for joining.